Welcome back to another episode. Before you listen to today's episode, I'd like to ask you a huge favor. So many of you listen to this podcast, but you're not yet subscribed, potentially on any platform. The more of you that subscribe and share this with your friends, the more that we can bring more content to you, more topics and more knowledge and wisdom and amazing guests. And right now, this is my passion project. So I'm not making any money from it. And it does take a lot of my time amidst supporting my incredible clients inside the Lovely Radical Academy. And I get so many messages of lives that are being changed because of having access to this exciting knowledge and support and conversation and community. And by simply clicking a button to subscribe and to share, you're part of that impact, which is pretty cool. So take a moment now, hit subscribe, share this with your friends, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. I am really excited to introduce today my guest from the other side of the world, Jodeen Bergstrom. She has been in leadership development for most of her life and has hosted over 300 masterminds on Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Is that right? Yeah.
Probably more, but you know how you just quit counting. You're like
round number, right?
Let's do some rough math here.
And I know you've got a really massive audience and community on the network Clubhouse. And so I've invited her today to learn more about her journey, specifically through leadership, as it's one of my pet obsessions, and that experience for herself and being in the world like that. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us more about where you are, what you do. And we'll go from there.
Sounds awesome. Well, thank you for allowing me to be here and excited to speak into, everybody that's listening. Hopefully there's something that you can grab and implement. But my name is Jodeen and I grew up in North Dakota. So to give you kind of distance wise, I'm 42 miles from the Canadian border and then 58 miles from the Montana border. And then I'm 82 miles to the closest drive-through Starbucks. So kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a great place. I grew up here, moved away for 21 years. And during that time, I started a flower shop in Breckenridge, Colorado on Main Street. And then after 14 years in the mountains, we started to have family and kids and everything, and just decided that we wanted to go and have land. We weren't trust fund babies, so buying land in the mountains wasn't, one of the things that we were going to be able to do quickly. So we moved back to the Midwest, lived in Abilene, Kansas for about 7 years. And I have 5 daughters, all out of the same gene pool. So lots of woman spirit.
Yes.
They're all out of the house now. So I will tell you, if you're listening and you got a lot of little ones, eventually they do move away. They will move back. I will tell you that. I'll warn you. But they all are, have their own personality, but just embrace them because it's amazing how quickly it does go. My oldest is 31 and my youngest is 21. So it's whipped by, but it's all been a joy. And, my leadership, you were talking about that. And I was like, gosh, when did I really start leadership development? Or, when did that start coming in? And really, I grew up on a farm. And so I was driving a tractor when I was 5 years old. So, when you have the responsibility of a tractor and all you know is the steering wheel, and I was too little to push on the brake because these are old tractors, right? So the way that I shut things off was either, if whichever tractor it was, either the key or kill the gas. That was the only 2 things I knew. So, but with that, 4-H and Girl Scouts was a big part of my life. And so I, I held every office for 4-H. In the Girl Scouts, I sold the most cookies. Like I think sometimes leadership is just in your blood, right? I was the youngest of, 6 kids. And so always trying to just, kind of maybe prove myself just because, the baby kind of gets forgotten in a lot of sense. And so then into high school, I got into FFA and, held a lot of the officer positions there. And just really, I think that's when I realized the importance of leadership development, because I got into parliamentary procedure, which is, understanding how all the mechanics and, how the ethics of, each leadership role plays in an open meeting. And I think that's where the true heartfelt for leadership development started. But, I was kind of always practicing it. And then when I went to college and then moved, and it was 85 below 3 nights in a row here in North Dakota. And a week later I was in Denver and it was 55 above. I was like, my daddy didn't raise no dummy. I'm like, can I do my work study in Colorado? I was actually on a trip with my college advisor, and she's like, actually you could. And I'm like, seriously? So I moved to Colorado, was a head gardener for a little while, and then moved up to Breckenridge. And I think that's when my real leadership skills came in, because I started my own business. And then gratefully, I was actually exposed to Amway, or Quick Start, it was called. And my first mentor handed me the book, Think and Grow Rich. And he said, this is the business Bible, learn it in and out. And, I really did. I really studied that book, and that's why I've done so many masterminds on it. But that's kind of my journey of, really developing the leadership skills. So
I love
hopefully
that
helps and takes you on the journey a little bit.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about steering the tractor, and it's like, it's something that you were just bred to do. And we met in a networking event, essentially, that is all about our programming and how the things that we absorbed when we were raised, right, and how we continue that. And so I kind of had a very similar, nothing to do with a farm, but like parents who were kind of like, do the thing, like do it. The longevity wasn't necessarily there in my family, but I somehow picked it up. And I think you made a great point about like steering, as it is, you have the opportunity to grab your own steering wheel and just steer your way and keep going. And I'd love to hear your journey through business, through like having that initial knowledge, but what were the challenges for you along the journey of business and growth, both personally and professionally?
Great question. And I think the big thing is when you are stepping into business ownership, entrepreneurship, your leadership skills really, they come out, because you need to wear all the hats. And, my first business was a flower shop, and we did 28 weddings on Labor Day weekend, the last year that we were open. So we were very busy. And I think the big thing is in leadership, you have the ability to solve the problem. If I know you guys hear this, we've all heard it, right? But truly ask what the problem is. Just find out what the problem is. I was in Breckenridge, Colorado, so it was a destination, wedding location. So when the brides would come, when we first opened up, I realized that our biggest problem that we were seeing, not the biggest, but one of the problems was our grooms had to rent their tuxedos 2 hours away in Denver, bring them up to the mountains. If there was any problems, like some of them, in the beginning, it didn't take me long, because I realized it was a problem right away. But like one of the first weddings, the groom said, hey, do you have cufflinks? They didn't send me the cufflinks, or, it was something silly like that. And I was like, oh no, but I should have those, right? So I called around, and Jim's Formal Wear, I called them up and I was like, hey, I want to rent tuxedos. What do I need to do? And they're like, $50. This was 35 years ago, so don't quote me on these numbers, but literally $50. I got this big binder that had all of them in there. So when the bride would come in, I'd be like, hey, here again, upselling, right? If your groom, is interested in having tuxedos, if they rent 10 or more, his is free. Ding, ding. And they're like, oh, no brainer, right? So I could upsell the groom because he didn't have to pay for it. And then about a year later, in walked these guys, and they were like, they had this little award thing, and they're like, oh, we're with Jim's Formal Wear. You're in the top 10 for highest sales in our district, which was very big. And I was just like, oh, that's cool. And they looked around and they're like, you don't even have a mannequin in here? And I'm like, am I supposed to? They're like, we'll get you one. So, you know what I mean? I just solved the problem. And, you know what I mean? It was an easy no-brainer. So, you know, I mean, as leadership, you have to look for the problem, solve it. And that was a huge part of my success, just always looking to see. And I'm kind of a fixer anyway. So if somebody's got a problem, you know, I'm like, oh, let me fix that for you. Mother of 5, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that comes through from motherhood. And also, like, I mean, I have the same mentality as well. And I love that you saw the gap and you made a phone call. And sometimes it can be as simple as making a phone call. And yet we are, I mean, I don't know if this touches you as much, and we can get into that, especially with your experience on Clubhouse, but if this touches you as much as where society's got to with this like instant hit, like if I can't get it with a click, I'm not going to get it. It's going to be a big problem. Like we kind of create problems about problems and do nothing, when it could just be a phone call or maybe a couple of phone calls that solves a problem. And so I'd love to hear, did you ever have, whether it was yourself or witnessing it in team or others, where there was that attitude of just like making a big drama out of the problem rather than just making a phone call? Have you experienced that before?
I think for me, my personality comes with tenacity. And so for me, like there's no problem too big to solve. Like I'm gonna, you know, my ex-husband had the wall, right? First problem, shut down, you know, we're done, right? Where for me, I'd be going for, you know, 48 hours straight, just trying to figure out what I needed to do, right? So I think there's some DNA that comes into that. So try to find, and that comes back to team, right? And if you're familiar with the DISC personalities, you know, you need all of them. You know, you need the dominant, you need the steadies, you need the conscious ones, and you need the sensitive ones, because what happens is that makes a great balance. But if you find yourself, you know, shutting down at one point, then you need to look at, okay, this is not a strong skill set for me. I need to bring somebody on that can balance this out for me. And I think, you know, people really need to, and I know when you're a solopreneur, you have to do it all, right? And then there comes that point, but, you know, and now with AI, you can actually, you know, I've got some AI that where it's a whole business team, right? It's GPT boss. And I love it because like I can hire an executive, like I don't have to pay them. They're all AI. And
it's wild.
You know,
I've been reading about it.
It's crazy, but it helps you solve those problems that you are. And you don't have to just use that one. You know, even Chat GPT, you can go in and say, you know, act as a expert or persona, whatever it is, and it will give you that feedback. So as a solopreneur, you have no excuse nowadays. You know, literally you have no excuse because you can have that team. But here's the other thing, build that team now, even if it's in AI, so that when you need it, when your business comes up, you have the ability to have things in place. And the other thing too, I will say, when you're building that team, no matter what system you're doing, whatever you're building out, record it. Loom is something that's free, or it's like $15 a month, very cheap if you get too much of it. But get in there, show people what you're doing, even if it's just showing yourself. And even when you're showing yourself, you're like, holy shit, I don't need to do all these. I could just do
like
this,
anchoring
right?
it in there. Yeah.
You've got it ready. Now, when you do hire that team, when you've made that, you know, little bit of money, now it's just like, oh gosh, now I got to train them. No, I've already showed, you know, myself and them, because I was looking for them. And there again, that whole leadership is, you've got to see the bigger picture. Don't focus on here, because you've got to be building that team, even if it's that imaginary. And Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, he had an imaginary council that he talked to all the time. Now we can do that same thing in Chat GPT. The only cool thing is we get to read exactly what they're saying instead of just making it up, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty amazing. You know, leadership has, in some aspects, has gotten easier, but at the same time, you know, I mean, the big thing you've got to understand with leadership, for, you know, we kind of talked about, you know, the trends of what's going on, and the emotional intelligence is going to be huge. You know, and you have, I would say, if you are sitting here, you know, AI is going to, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's going to, you know, push you out because you're not knowledgeable. So I've been telling everybody, get in there, figure out how you can embrace it, and you can add more value than your competition. So you have no excuse now to be on the bottom, ring of the ladder, right? Because you now have the ability, everything is, and it's free. If you've got internet, if you're listening to this, somehow or another, you've got some internet, right? So there's not even an excuse.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a high D. I'm like, just do it.
Yeah. And so am I think that's why I wanted to have this chat with you, because we're very similar in that regard. And also, like, I remember hearing Dr. Joe Dispenza say, he's like, it's the age of information. Ignorance is a choice. Yeah. So we could be walking around complaining about everything that's wrong, but you can literally find, like, yeah, there's some bad information out there, and maybe there's some AI programs that aren't perfected and they're going to drive you a bit nuts at first, but like, that's how we build that muscle, and we learn and we get better, and we get, we add our thing into what's happening and what's coming. I'd love to hear your experience of business and leadership with children as well. Like, what was that for you? Because I know that there's a lot of, and I'm not a mom yet, I am a daughter who had two very hardworking parents, but who were still there for us in the best capacity they could be. And what was that experience like for you? How did it impact your emotions, your business, your leadership?
Growing up in a farm, there's always leadership. My mom was big into community service. So she was involved in a lot of, associations. And so I always saw, she was the assessor, and, she was secretary for this and president for that. So, in fact, she was 83 years old when she retired. She worked in the school system for 53 years. So worked with a lot of children. And she, when she quit, I became her personal chauffeur, because in the oil industry, all the oil trucks had come in. We had the big boom. And so I said, well, I'll just, drive around. That's too dangerous. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, Mom, I'm exhausted running you around to all of your stuff. I'm like, how'd you do that while working? Because it wasn't like she picked up a whole bunch of stuff. She just, but so I always saw that leadership role. And so, and because of 4-H, because of, Girl Scouts, my 5 daughters, we were big into 4-H. The couple of them did Girl Scouts for a little bit, but most of them, we just mostly did 4-H because we had animals. I've hauled horses around for 27 years. And, it's just one of those things where I think, especially now, parents, listen to me. It is your responsibility to build your child up. It's not the school system. It's not the churches. It's not the outside world, not our government. It is your responsibility. And you have leadership skills, whether you like it or not, and you have persuasion. Your persuasion is to get their shoes on and get them out the door, within the time limit, right? So you have leadership skills, and you have sales skills, right? Because you're always selling to a child. And so the biggest part of that is, though, that you have the power of influence, and children will learn by watching what you do. And so take that to heart, because, in the NLP and the hypnosis and the neuroscience, you talked about Joe Dispenza, that 0 to 7 years is so, so crucial, because they're picking up all these different things, and it's in the subconscious mind, and we don't realize all the things that are being planted in their subconscious mind. And, and there can be some misfiring. I mean, nobody's perfect. Parents are always trying to do the best that they can. And so, we all have trauma. There's no perfect family out there, right? But do the best that you can, get in there, and don't be afraid to be a leader to your child, and ask them to be a leader, right? I think now we're so, nobody wants to get in and get involved, right? Get your kid off the computer, get your kid off of MindWorks. I was like, what's that? Those games, get them off of those games, get them out there, get them out there doing the cutting the lawns, helping the neighbors. Like, that's leadership, because we have to learn servant leadership. And I think we're missing that in our society because everybody's like, they're not wanting to get involved, right? Nobody goes to the nursing homes. Like we grew up, every holiday we'd go to the nursing homes and sing. I don't see kids doing that as often, right? And those things are crucial because those elders need those children need those elders. And I think that that's a part that society is really kind of, letting slip through the cracks.
Yeah,
So
that's an interesting point as well. And I've noticed, like, if I were to look at my parents' generation, they were told, don't feel your emotions, don't just suck it up and do the thing. And, so our generation was like, okay, well, we don't know how to feel or express our emotions. And now the new generation seems to be like, well, emotions, what? And to your point of looking after the older generation, like I've been noticing a lot of talk lately about what we're potentially heading into in regards to population collapse. And I don't know how accurate this is, but there's been a lot less people for the last 20, 30 years having children. So we're apparently looking to have a much larger, older generation, a much, 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 much smaller, younger generation. And we're already pretty bad with taking care of our older generation as it is. And so I love that you made that point, and that as parents or just as people in the community, we can be a leader by our actions, and whether that's self-care, self-love, doing something for ourselves, but also doing something for others with the energy that gives. I think that's really, really powerful. Talk to me about Clubhouse. I'd love to.
I will, but before we go to Clubhouse, and I think this is probably we need to have another conversation on this.
Yeah,
I think bring it out there. I think it's a trend that I'm seeing, and that is there are more and more millennials that are becoming estranged to their parents, primarily their mothers.
Yes.
And I would love to have a conversation about that, because I feel it's a trend.
Let's go there.
That, because we have this all about me, all of this, and that's why I say, and here's the thing, if you are struggling with a relationship, I'm just going to challenge you to go talk to that person, because our memories are not always accurate, right?
Oof. Yeah.
And so your perception, and here's the thing too, I'm seeing a lot of these millennials are in therapy. Great, that's super. But understand, a therapist position is to get you to the next meeting.
Yeah.
And they want you to talk about the past. Where coaches and life coaches and therapists that, are schooled in dealing with those types of traumas, or, whatever you got going on, their goal is to get you healthy and have a better relationship.
To a new level. Yeah.
Right. So 1, seek the right people to help you. And 2, probably the first one, go talk to the person that the memories are about, because there's a great chance that the emotions that were tied into that have miscued that memory. And there's probably some inaccuracies. And plus, you don't know the whole story. And if you're talking to a therapist, that therapist doesn't know the other side of the story either. So that's another topic. Happy to.
Yeah, I'm full body chills right now, because so what really pushed, like, I was dabbling with coaching for many, many years, because I knew that I was great at it and I do many other things, but it was going into therapy for 2 years after a breakup where I came out suicidal. Like, I was more depressed than when I went in, because we'd taken things that might have been nothing and turned them into, you were sexually traumatized, potentially by a family member. Everyone knew about it. Everyone's a narcissist. You need to disconnect from them. And she was a lovely person, this therapist. And yet that's where that went very quickly. And it was horrifying for me, because on the other side of it, I've now worked with great coaches and we know many of the same ones. And it's like, well, I actually don't know if that was real, because I don't have a memory. And I have so many people coming to me now saying, I've got trauma. I was sexually traumatized. I was abused. I was this. I was like, tell me about it. And they're like, I don't really remember it, but either a therapist told me, or I just know it because of these behaviors. And I watched something on the internet. Like, And there's a significance, and one of the main human needs, which Tony Robbins talks about, is significance. We all want to be significant, but do we really want to be significant having a trauma? Or could we take whatever that pain is and turn it into something better? And blaming the parents, I've now got a totally new relationship with my parents that I decided to build by having difficult conversations. So,
and I think that's the other thing too, just that generation, instead of having those difficult conversations, they just shut down because they've been programmed to just throw away relationships. You know, it's kind of like this whole, relationships are now disposable, right? If it doesn't work, that's why our marriage, our divorce rate is so high. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to go flip to the other side of the fence because it's greener over there. And that's why even third and fourth divorces are even higher, numbers, because they don't ever take the time to fix the issues that are inside, and they just bring them into the next relationship.
And they've already created a program that they can just move to something else. And that part is probably quite fun, and they remember that. Whereas, perhaps they forget the whole process of having to.
And, the other thing too, I'm a certified John Maxwell speaker, and, John did an amazing leading through crisis for COVID. And, the big part of leadership too is make sure you have accurate information. Because, we all got exposed to a lot of, inaccurate information. And how could we distinguish what was real and what wasn't real? Because all the major, it was being thrown at us from all different directions, right? But, I think that that's really important too for, as a parent. Kind of skipped all around here. Hopefully people are following us here.
Yeah, it's great.
I think it is important, for as a parent to be making sure that you do have, the best information that you can, that accuracy, and just pivoting too. I think that that's a big part of children because they're growing, they're experiencing different things, and in any situation, especially in a crisis situation, you've got to pivot. We've all, this last 3-4 years, have had to pivot beyond what we could even imagine prior, to BC, before COVID. And it's like, it's just one of those things where I think, I would love to have a deeper conversation on that, because I think that that's a whole separate thing, but I think it needs to be talked about, because I think the other part of that is my biggest fear is nobody's speaking about it. And so everybody's just accepting it. And I went into a group of over 50, because I'm over 50, and I was appalled at the number of women that responded back. I had like 64 comments. They're like, oh yeah, you're right there. You're right there. Yeah, I'm there, and I was just like, wow. And then they're like, yeah, there's groups here on Clubhouse or on Facebook. And I just added up the numbers, and there were 41,000 people in those groups.
Yeah. And I've seen other groups with plenty, like everyone's aware, and yet no one is going to talk about it at this point. And you could map that particular thing across to the relationship with parents, the relationships that are falling apart between men and women, like where we've got a little bit of data and we've created a story from that little bit of data that suits whether it's our scarcity or our little bubble that we want to stay in. And so we're like, cool, that's my story, which means I get to push that thing that makes me uncomfortable, whether it's a partner or a parent or a particular group in society. I get to push them away because this is my story and they're bad. And yet I know it's Brene Brown who talks about it. She says, in the absence of all the data, the mind creates a story, and then we ruminate on that, and then we talk to everyone else about it and build it up without talking to the one person. And yet that might never have been an actual reality. And so I think, like actually having conversations about what happened there, or what is the story, or, actually just, I think to bring it back to knowing ourselves and that emotional intelligence, because there was a lot of talk about critical thinking and that during all of that. And there's so many terms now that are just like, oh, you're one of those. But it's like, But just, this is a lot of my career has been self-research and just determining, okay, well, that feels real. I've done that and physically experienced it. So I know that's a thing. Like, how can we start to, and I've had time to do that. And I know many people would say, oh, I have kids, I have a job, I have all these things. And I had a lot of things, including sickness. So I did it anyway. It's like, how can we, I don't know if you have a thought around this, but like, how can we create that excitement or desire to have those conversations that are uncomfortable in order to open up? Because I know you and I know what's on the other side of that difficult conversation is so incredible. Like,
well, I think the big thing you have to understand is everyone wants to take the easy road. So, not going to do it. But here's the thing. If you do that, you are denying yourself of true healing and truly being who your greatest purpose, right? Because if you don't address the skeletons in the closet, you're still carrying that with you. And we all have trauma. We all have luggage. We're all bringing it, right?
Yeah.
And, some of it's really, really hard to open those locks. Yeah. But once you get in there and have those real conversations, and if you really are wanting to live a fulfilling life, you got to have those tough conversations. And sometimes those tough conversations are just with yourself. And I understand you're busy. I had 5 kids, and let me tell you, they were very social kids. So like, it wasn't like I just only had 5 kids at the house, right?
Yeah.
We had the open door policy. Like, I didn't buy just one box of popsicles. It was like 7 of them, because I knew, like, everybody would be popping in. Like, it was just a safe place. So, I grew up very busy. We had horses, and so we had animals, and we were going, like, my kids were in sports. They were in rodeoing, they were in horse shows, and cats, and like all these things. So like, you don't have to talk to me about being busy, right? And then when I moved up here to North Dakota, I opened a restaurant. I was still raising kids. I had my parents that were moving into elder age. We started caring for them. Like, you don't have to talk to me about busy life, because I get you. Yeah. Sometimes that moment where you're healing or you're really getting real is in the shower. Sometimes it's that, I'm a big component of before you go to bed, run through the day. If there's anything that didn't go ideal, rewrite it so that you're not bringing that to your sleep. Get a good night's sleep. And before you get up, it's like, my big thing is, okay, what am I need to accomplish today? Where am I going to do? And that was always the thing. My ex-husband was like, he's like, you always got to stay in bed a little bit longer. And I was like, because that's where I compose my day. Like, that was my little part, because once you hit the ground, when you got kids, like, you are like, you're gone, like, your day's gone. But I'd always take like that little 7-minute period. It wasn't like I didn't need an hour or anything. It was just like, I just need that moment to compose. And so I would go through and, figure out my day of how I was doing. But that's how I functioned when you got 5 little ones, that are 10 years apart. So, it's like, do what works for you. And if you don't know what works for you, try different things. Now I'm really good with, block scheduling. I block things out, right? Some of them, I'm a high D. I'm very artistic. I don't need a lot of detail. I do through my mind. If you need to script it out, if that's your thing. Whatever works for you. Don't take what Tony Robbins says you need to do. Don't take, what Mel says you have to do, Mel Robbins. Like, you do what you need to do, because they don't know your life. You know your life. Take leadership for who you are, and then let that work, and if other people are like, well, you should be doing this, say, oh, maybe I'll try it, but right now this is working for me, and it will change. Like, through your life. Don't get hung up that, you have to do everything the same way, because we have seasons. And, there's just, that's how life progresses, right? So as a leader, don't be afraid to change either, because that's a big part, especially with all this AI and, all of the change that we had. We had a lot of governments that came in and tried to, impose different things on us. And, I didn't get the shot. I didn't, we're in North Dakota. We didn't shut down, and it was like, it was hard to actually understand what everybody else was going, because I was on Clubhouse during that time. Yeah. And it was so hard because our lives kind of continued pretty normally compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
So I know I kind of railroaded off. Do you want me to talk a little bit about Clubhouse, or do we have time? I don't want to.
I was just going to say, just I guess to round out the talking about, growth and difficult conversations and all of that, I wanted to make a point to something that helped me a lot, and I know has helped so many people I know in regards to that piece of having the difficult conversation, because so many people get stuck on, like, all of their programming already says don't do it because that's danger. But Brene Brown also says, I think she calls it the story rumble hour, and it's just like, you did this thing, or you looked at me this way, or you said this thing, and I'm creating a story that it means this. Can we talk about it? And it's a beautiful way just to move into someone who's triggering you in some way, shape, or form and be like, hey, you did this thing. I'm creating this story that it means this. Can we talk about it? And I think that's just a piece that some people may like to have that has helped me a lot, because the fight or flight in those moments can be very real, right? Just like,
that's beautiful. And I'm real quick, I'm gonna just because it relates to this, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I was traveling with my daughter, and I said, because she wanted to eat, but then she decided she didn't want to eat. And then before we hit the interstate, I was like, hey, if you want to eat, because I had said I wasn't hungry. So, because I wasn't hungry, she wasn't going to eat, right? I was like, hey, if you want to stop and eat, I'll that's fine. I said, I'll grab something to drink, I was just trying to, help her, right? And it triggered her, and she got really, really mad about it and kind of stewed, how it is with mother-daughters sometimes. And so she stewed about it for a while. And then when we stopped, I was like, I realized, and I think maybe in the conversation of what she said was, you never listen to me. Her word, yeah, that's what it was. When she kind of spit back at me, she goes, you never listened to me. I said no. And so then I had a little time to kind of, process that. And I realized, I was sexually abused as a child. And so my theory was that if somebody would listen to me long enough, I could have told them what was going on.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my inner belief. And then when, and she ended up taking a nap. So that gave me time to kind of process everything. So then when she woke up, I said, look, I want you to understand something. I said, when I'm asking you, because I've noticed that my kids were kind of irritated every time I'd say, are you sure, or something like that. They'd be really annoyed about it. And she said, Mom, when you do that, that tells me that you don't listen to me. And I said, okay, I said, I appreciate that. I'll take that. I said, but let me tell you my perspective of why I do that. And then I shared, why I asked them multiple times, because in my experience, nobody would ask me what was going on, or if I truly wanted that. So, I mean, just the miscommunication, simple things like that have huge triggers, and you don't even understand it. And it wasn't, because of, knowledge and my desire to learn more about the subconscious and, getting certifications in hypnosis and NLP and all, and emotional change technique, that allowed me to be able to figure out what was really going on there. Because before there was just always this conflict, and it was just like, I'm a mom, I'm here to help you. My whole goal is to fix things, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is their interpretation of what I'm doing was that I didn't care enough I wasn't really listening to what they were saying. But they didn't understand that I was listening, and I was just reassuring them that if they had more to say, but in their process and, our relationship, that wasn't coming across. So that was a huge eye opener. So I just wanted to put that into real context of what, Brene is talking about. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. We've all got different programs that we're running, and so much of the time we just assume that someone else is running the exact same program if they're in our life, but it's usually not the case.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, let's have a quick chat about Clubhouse. And I'd love to, mainly because it's like we've got so many visual platforms, we've got so many different ways that you can consume content. And I know Clubhouse really jumped onto the scene as this audio only thing. I think it was really in 2020, correct me if I'm wrong. But what was what led you to that space, and what was your experience, and how have you grown because of it?
Well, I actually got an invite from Russell Brunson, and didn't really, it's kind of like one of those things of like, oh, here, what is this, right? And so finally I jumped on, and back then it was invite only. So, I had to be invited. So Russell had brought me on. And if you don't know who Russell Brunson is, he's the CEO of ClickFunnels and huge marketing SaaS company. But I was like, okay, I'll do this game, right? And so I logged in, and I was, at that time, it was 2-week waiting period. Most people said,
yeah, I remember that.
Get on now because it'll take you a while to get on. Well, because I had known Kevin Anson, who's a video photographer for Russell, and we were on Voxer, we've done some work together. I got let into the front door like within like 20 minutes. Like, it was really crazy because it was just like, I just plugged it on. I was like, oh, I'll just set that there. And, after the new year, because it was right around Christmas time, I was like, after the new year, I'll jump on. That's kind of, what I had processed, right? Well, all of a sudden I get this ding, and it was like, the Clubhouse is open. And I'm like, that's weird. And so I jumped on, but when I went on, I made the decision that I was going to allow any opportunity, because real quick, about 7 years ago, I lost both my parents within 3 months of each other. 6 months later, I lost, we closed down our business. And then 8 months later, my ex-husband walked out after 33 years. So I went deep down into depression and, didn't really want life to go on. So I had taken Think and Grow Rich, because I got to that point where I almost did take my life. And I was like, I heard my mom's words to me were, go out and be so successful that you piss them off even more. And so that tenacity, kicked in, and she knew what words I needed to have, linger with me. And so that's when I grabbed Think and Grow Rich and made the decision that I needed to do something different. And that book has always resonated with me. So I've read it many, many times throughout the years and done many masterminds on it. So then I was like, okay, so I was kind of coming out of that error. And so I had made that decision where I was going to let any opportunity that, knocked, I was going to open the door. So obviously Clubhouse was a door.
Yeah.
So I went in and I said, hey, what do I do? And they're like, go open a room. I opened a room. Nobody showed up. I was there for 20 minutes and I, threw it down, and I was just like, I got teenagers, because at that time we were here with COVID, and I had 2 disgruntled teenagers. One was home from college and one was home from high school.
Yeah.
And so, hormones are horrible. Hormones are even worse in COVID, and they're even worse when you're confined to one building, right? So it was just like, okay, I will, I'll just see what this does. And so the next day I kind of went, there's something here, but I didn't know what it was. So I opened up, went on again. And then I found the marketers, and they were like, go open another room, go open another room. So I was like, okay. So I opened a room, and I had 40 people that showed up like immediately. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. So then I got invited by one of the participants that was in my room. She's like, hey, we want to do a room for 24/7 and, host like one of the longest, running rooms. I was like, well, I'm not going 24/7 because I actually kind of like to sleep. She's like, no, yeah, I'm from the Philippines. We got people on the other side. Don't worry. I just need you, during the day. I was like, okay, I'll try it. So we ended up, I hosted from 8 in the morning until usually about 11 at night.
Wow.
And I did that for 21 consecutive days. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
But that's where the leadership came on, because I was moderating. I had the likes of Russell was in there, Grant Cardone, Forbes Riley, Damon John, like all of these guys, they
were
came
jumping
through
on.
there.
Yeah, I remember.
Exactly. And so then the room was called, what it takes to run $1 million business. So my concern was we were bringing people up on the stage that hadn't ran $1 million business, and I had run $1 million business, several of them. And so like, I knew the mindset, like there's a different persona from somebody that has done it versus somebody who thinks they know how to do it.
Yeah.
So we started vetting people. We, had them fill out an application.
Yeah.
And, JT Fox, I don't know if you guys know him, but he is a big guy. Had no clue who he was. Brought him up on the stage and said, oh, he sounds kind of intelligent. So I pushed him back down, sent him the application. And, that's the joke, that I pushed him down. He was like, what do I need to do to get on that stage? What do I need to do? And so, because I was kind of ignorant of who was who, like Damon John, I kind of knew him, but I had a run in with him. I was trying to interview Elena Cardone. I've been trying to talk to her, and he kind of bolted in, and I was like, hey, that's great, Damon, but right now I'm talking to Elena. He was just like, he gave his little speech real quick and then left the room, and I'm like, whatever, but I wasn't intimidated by others, I mean, I in Breckenridge, there was those are second homeowners. Those people have money. If they've got money for $1 million to $2 million second home, they've got money, right? So, I mean, I've been around people with, big money. And so I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't scared. I didn't, and I also, because of my leadership skills with John Maxwell, I brought out deeper thinking questions, and we were testing different types of, because at that point it was pretty new, and there were less than 100,000 people on the app when I came on, and then it blew up to 1 million. The marketers came up and it was huge. So, but so I used a lot of leadership skills of just commanding, the audience, and, I didn't allow any negativity. If they started to get out of control. In fact, after we did that 21 days, my voice, could you imagine, kind of got a little sore. So I was like, I'm going to take a break here. All of a sudden I get a phone call, and they're like, Grant Cardone needs you in here now. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, he's got a room out of control. And so I was like, so I popped on and I went right up to the top of the stage with him, and, I got everybody under control. And he was giving away $10,000 for somebody's business. Yeah, right. And so he had this lady in there, and I had been in a room 2 days prior with Trey Llewellyn. I was hosting him, and he had given her a beautiful funnel. She was, had hair extensions, and his wife, spent a lot of money on hair extensions. And a little confession, Trey didn't know how much she really did love him. But anyway, you learn a lot of things on Clubhouse, is the point I'm making there. Anyway,
they're real people, just like all of us.
Exactly. But so now this same lady was in with Grant Cardone, asking for $10,000 and giving him 50% of her business. And so he's talking blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, I'm like, Grant, can I chime in here? And he's like, sure, go for it. And so I'm like, where are you at with that funnel that you got 2 days ago from Trey? Oh, I've been so busy, I haven't looked at it, I haven't done it yet, and blah, 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 excuse. And I was like, stop. I'm like, I'm going to speak to you, honest and raw, and anybody else here in the room that's listening. And I think there was 3,000 people at the time listening. I was like, I've watched you guys come into every room, looking for every blueprint, looking for every, insight. And I said, at some point, if you truly want to be an entrepreneur, I'm like, it's kind of like it shows up as coveralls, and you got to do the damn work. I'm like, so Grant, if I were you, I would not give her $10,000, because if she can't even do the work to see if she can get, I mean, she's got a whole blueprint written out. And I said, and I know it works because I've watched Troy use that exact same funnel over and over and over, and he's made millions of dollars. I said, if she is not going to roll up her sleeves and get the work done, then I would not invest in her, because that tells me she's not going to be, concerned about your money. Right. And somebody was like, whoa, who was that? And Grant goes, I think that was your mama bear.
Yes. It's so true though, because I my years in network marketing and now my years as a coach, it's just that running theme. And when you speak to thousands upon thousands of people about what they want to do with their life and their dreams and their ideas and their goals, And maybe they're also learning and learning and learning. Like there's an addiction to learning as well that we can get stuck in. But then there's like the implementation.
Yeah.
Like if you actually start dedicating an hour a day to do the thing,
Right.
you get there so fast. Like, especially when you're getting handed, like I've given out so much for free over the years and people don't do anything with it. It just
Well,
drives
here's
me
the
nuts sometimes.
the crazy part though, it has been so gratifying because I've had more people in the last maybe 6 months reach out and they're like, because of you, I have been able to do XYZ. Like you don't realize how many people you impact.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been pretty amazing. And like even the other night I was because then I got into the NFT space because through that too, I missed out on the Bored Ape. You know, I hosted some rooms and couldn't figure out their technical babble that they were talking about and missed out on that $200 opportunity. But eventually did get into NFTs, and I'm also noted as the NFT godmother because there again, I didn't listen to what I learned, you know, practice what we preach, right? But and I got rugged for about $2,500 in my wallet, the first NFT I tried to buy. So I could have, you know, rolled up my little sleeves and went to the corner and crying. And I was like, no, I need to figure this out. So I opened again, Power of Clubhouse, 30 consecutive nights. I went from 8 o'clock at night, and now they can record. Back then when we were doing those all-nighters, 24/7s, you couldn't record the room. Now you can. And so I would do 6 hours because that's as much as they could record. And so for 30 consecutive nights, I found the developers, I found the security, like I learned so much. And so there again, pivoting, I could have, you know, whined and cried because I got, you know, lost that $2,500. But for taking and opening on those 30 consecutive nights, now I'm an empty nester. I don't have kids. I don't, you know, I mean, you know, everybody's story is a little bit different and you don't have to do 6 hours, but the conversation always went for 6 hours. Because people loved it and they were learning just as I was. So, you know, and about the third or fourth day, somebody noted, hey, you're kind of our NFT godmother, because I wanted to everybody know about the security of everything, right? And so that's how I got coined the NFT godmother, is because I was concerned. I was, you know, like, don't give out your password. Like I was like just preaching all the time.
Just there's some things that you could know that will make it a better experience.
Exactly. So I mean, there again, pivoting, right? Like it was that I got thrown that, you know, lemon. So I made some lemonade out of it, met some amazing people, was able to, a lot of developers like helped other NFT projects sell out, you know, interviewed them, really was able to build, you know, authority, just because I was questioning, you know, other people, like, how did this happen? Like just interviewing people, I was able to become an authority, and that there you build up that leadership. So even if you don't know the answers, you ask the questions and you can build up being a leader. And that's what Tony Robbins has done. You know, the reality is Tony Robbins, when he wrote his book, like the book that he wrote, he was in financial distress, right? So what did he do? He went out and interviewed everybody that was in the finance area. And because he interviewed them, everybody thought he was the expert. He was just the interviewer, right?
He was just repeating knowledge for ages until he got qualified in some extra things.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there again, don't think. And the other thing I'm gonna just note about Tony, he has no certifications. And go look up his net worth. I'm just gonna leave it there because it changes quite often.
A few things that he's got. And I love.
I'm not gonna give you everything, but you can go look up that. But there again, you don't have to, everyone thinks, you know, to be a leader, you have to have all this knowledge and you have to have all this. Like I didn't know anything about, well, I mean, I knew enough on the NFTs that I should have done differently, but I didn't listen, right? I unfortunately sometimes have to, you know, go through experiences to really know, but like everybody trusted me because like I was vigilant. I was like, don't you ever do this. And I'm going to tell you that, you know, like I was convicted to it because I knew the other side. I knew the pain on the other side. So sometimes when you have bad things happen to you, and the other thing as a leader, love to fail. Napoleon Hill invited adversity into his life. The more that, and if you're, and I'm going to go back to the kids. If you are a parent right now, and I wish I would have done this with my kids, ask them every day, how did they fail? Who's it that has the Spanx? What's her name? Spanx is.
Oh, yeah, I know, and I can't remember.
I always went to be.
I want
Anyway,
to say Lauren, but I don't know if it's a Lauren. It's
nah.
Spanx.
Either way,
Spanx.
whoever.
Yeah.
Mrs. Spanx.
Yeah.
Her dad asked her every day when she would come home from school at the dinner table, "How did you fail today?"
Mm. Yeah.
I feel that that's a huge part of her being able to accomplish what she did.
Yeah.
Right? Because she was mentally prepared for that.
Mm.
She knew that, and she's like, yeah, then, towards the end, I was like, hey, Dad, I failed this way. And he'd be like, yeah, like, because we're so want to cradle and, oh, you're okay. And like, in the horse industry, it got to be everybody got an award. And I was like, no, we can't be doing this. You can't have everybody being a winner. Okay. Because that's not how the real world works.
Yeah. It's just suppressing what we're capable of. Like, we are so limitless. And I didn't have someone asking me how I failed, but at a certain point, so many awful, like human experiences had happened to me or around me that I was like, this is almost getting comical, because like, how much am I gonna have experienced? And then I just started being like, well, what if I just start treating failure as comical? What if I have a giggle every time something bad happens and go, cool, what can I do with this? And how can I learn from this and grow from this? Like, what else are you going to do? Like, you could dig yourself a big pit and sit in there and cry for ages, and I did for a while.
That didn't work. Nobody
I did it a few times. And
Here's the thing I'm going to say real quick on this, because it's so crucial for why do you want failure? Why is that such a big thing? Because there's greatness on the other side. We think that when we fail, like, it's detrimental, like nobody's going to respect you, blah, 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 all these things. First of all, even you look at the football players or the basketball players or all those guys, the NBA, all the major players, right? Everybody thinks like, oh, it was so great. Go and look at how many times they failed, right? They got accustomed to missing the goalie or whatever it is that they were doing. They got accustomed to that, but they just practiced harder and became better than the rest.
Yeah.
And that's how they got there. But failure is a big, big part of that.
Yeah.
And I think
sorry, you go.
That's been a missing part. That's been a missing part of our society. Everybody thinks that, oh, and instant gratification, even here on YouTube, TikTok, all these, influencers. And that is a little bit something I wanted to do a little touch on. I think we should just do individual podcasts for each.
Yeah, I know. We're going to have a few of these.
Go on. But here's my concern of modern day leadership. It's this viral getting into a position, and are they going to be able to truly handle that role of leadership and keep it in a way that our culture can grow healthy from it, right? Because I think there's some of these instant gratifications of, getting a couple viral, getting those followers, getting paid, and all of a sudden now they're in this leadership position, but they haven't grown. It's the law of the lid. And,
or even decided who they want to be as a leader, what they want to stand for, who they are, in many cases.
But John talks about that, the law of the lid, right? So if your leadership skills are at like an 8 or a 9, your tribe is never going to get past that if you're not growing, right? So you've got that instant glorification and leadership position, but then how are you, growing yourself so that you can lead that culture further, right? And in a healthy direction. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that you touched on finding a point of reference too. I think you mentioned athletes, and also I have been diagnosed with lots of different things over the years. And I say to people, I'm like, whatever your label is, whatever the limit that you've decided that you have is, there is someone out there who is wildly successful because they chose to look at it a different way, because they chose to find other people who had grown through it and made it better. And I think that's such a powerful thing that anyone can do. Like, get around new people. And if you can't do that physically, do it online. Like that's how, like YouTube kind of saved my life. And like all these people I may never meet, like Tony Robbins and all of them, like they were the people I would roll over to at 5 a.m. when I had fibromyalgia, and I was just like, get myself out of bed. Like it can start like that, and no one else is going to do it for us, right? So I want to be respectful of both of our time. So I always ask everyone this question. We've covered it so much already, but perhaps you could wrap it up in a nutshell, or just the first thing that really comes through is, what does leadership mean to you and for you?
That's a great question. And I think the big thing when it comes to leadership, I made some notes because like I knew I'd talk a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I think leadership right now, we need to be practicing active listening. When we get into conversations, we are so in tune of wanting to answer the question that we don't always hear what somebody's trying to say.
Yeah.
So active listening is leadership. And, you know, I did a gratitude challenge. And one of the days for that challenge I had is just listen to people for the day. Don't try to answer the question, but for a 48-hour period, just listen and see how much more you hear. So active listening, I think, is a good one. And then also embracing lifelong learning. Like, you know, I mean, I'm 54 and I feel like I know so little, but I've been studying my whole life, right? There's so much more out there. Yeah. So, and my mom was 91 years old when she passed away, and she still had her crossword puzzles and reading the paper and like always putting in, you know, always challenging. So I think if you're looking for that longevity, you've got to be, you know, keeping that brain active. And so how can you do that? By actively learning. And I think that that's a huge part of leadership. And leading by example. Like, you know, it's so easy to be just, you know, talk is cheap, but you know, how you walk is, you've got so many people watching you.
Yes.
And that's what they're going to take. So, I mean, leading by example is really good. And then just foster a growth mindset, you know, encourage your team members, and also just take risks. You know, we talked about that a little bit too. And then the last point, because I don't want to run too much over here, is just like you and I are doing right now, build relationships. Yeah. You know, strong relationships are the heart of effective leadership. So, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And just even if you don't, you know, have a team right now, like I said, with the AI you can build, but Napoleon Hill talks about the power of the mastermind. If you are not surrounding yourself with 8 to 12 growth-minded people, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your clients. Because, and here's the thing, if you have a coach, or if you've signed into somebody and they don't have a coach, I'd get the heck out of there, because we all need to be growing. And if we're not setting that level and that bar higher, and your coach isn't doing that, there again, that law of the lid, right? You're only going to get taken to a certain part. Yes. So, you know, leadership, I think, is really big part of being a mastermind, so that you can be around, because they're going to challenge you. You know, I think that that's really, really crucial, to find those people. And they don't have to be in the same industry. In fact, you don't want people in the same industry, because you want to see people that have different perspective, right? They have different experiences. So don't be caught up of like, oh, I can, you know, I'm in, let's say you're in, e-commerce, right? Let's say you do e-commerce. Don't find just e-commerce people, right? Find people that are really, really good at speaking on stages, people that are, you know, in the banking industry, people that, you know, find people. And, you know, even in the beginning, if it's just a free group that you pull together, you know, and just say, hey, like, you like this, I like, you know, let's be constructive and, you know, have a mastermind, so that even just a check-in for once a month, and you solve, in a true mastermind too, you just present what your problem is. Like, you know, hey, I've got an e-commerce store. Facebook ads right now suck. I don't know what to do. I can't keep this up. I'm spending $100 to, $200,000 a month, whatever, maybe it's $10, whatever it is, and then somebody might say, oh, you know what? Their algorithm sucks right now. You should be over on Google, or you should be on YouTube. YouTube is really good right now. And, I've been experiencing growth on YouTube. So then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I didn't even think of YouTube. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that power of outside thinking is going to really embrace your ability to grow. So I know I went way over there. I apologize.
No, that's fantastic. And I love that the power of connection is so massive. And it was one of the things, like, leadership was maybe more the business side of things that inspired me to start a business, but it was connection that was like the more woo-woo spiritual side of it, because you could just bump into someone on the street or in a mastermind or in a group container and be like, oh my God, you just opened me up to my first $1 million year, or your sister is my soulmate, or whatever it is. Like, you just never know what one connection could lead to. And yet so many of us are just, what? Like, so there's so much power in that. I love this conversation. Where can people find more from you? Where's the best places, platforms, websites?
Yes. If you go to Jodeen, so my JODEEN.club, if you think of Clubhouse, CLUB, and yes, it's a URL. That's my social tap. So click on there. I actually have a lot of free PDFs. So feel free to grab those. And, I actually have a business plan on there. So anybody that's looking, and if you're in business and you do not have a business plan, go download that. It's from the United States SBA. And, that exact form, I actually, when I started my restaurant, used that exact form and was able to secure a $6,500 loan to start my business. Amazing. And, that business ran for 7 years, and we pulled $750,000 the first year and $1 million the other 6 years, each year. So, simple little thing of getting a business plan, into perspective. And you're like, oh, that's just for the bank. I self-fund myself, so I don't really need to do that. Bullshit. Then you really need to be doing it because you're the banker. Right. And it will bring clarity to you. And then if there is a point where you do have huge growth, and there will be, because once you get that clarity, you will be able to grow. And I think that that's another part of leadership is just, documenting where you're at in the process, and, treat it like a business. I always tell people, if you do not have a business plan or a business checking account, you are a hobby. So you better get real. And, commit yourself, because once you commit yourself, you will see a huge change in that. So
I love that. Love that.
I kind of got my soapbox.
This has been such a great conversation. And I know we've got probably plenty more topics that we could get into. So we will have to definitely revisit this in the future. But thank you so much for being here. And I hope everyone goes and checks out all of that. I will put it in the show notes as well. And we'll see you all on the next episode.
You guys.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please make sure that you do that before you go about your day, and make sure you share this with anyone who you thought of while you were listening to the amazing information shared. The more you support, even by just the click of a button, the more we are able to access incredible minds around this world and bring more of this exciting knowledge to you. So thank you again for your support. It means more than I could possibly say. And I hope you enjoy your day, and we'll see you on the next one.